wherever it might be, wherever it is that you are. Welcome back to another action-packed thrill ride of an episode of the 425 Show. So we're glad you're all here. Bit of an odd week at work this week. So got to remember some of our some of our colleagues who are no longer with us. Pretty sad week. Hard to watch, hard to be a part of, but I guess that's what everybody decided they wanted to do this week. It seems like we're not the only one. So, and who knows? I don't even know what the future holds here for me. So, anyway, on that positive note, hope everybody's doing well. Good to see you here, Fuel. You might just be me and you right now. We've got some more EPM work to do. We had a question in Discord we'll get to, some other things, but yeah. We got a little bit of code to finish today. Try to get this extension knocked out. You won't see me next Tuesday because Shannon's going to be back with some friends of hers, so that'll be fun. But in the interim, stuck here with me. So anyway, we've been working on our EPM Hackathon extension. Sort of a Rap Genius style thing for EPM, where we want to crowdsource our contributions as to what these various things mean inside the EPM portal, which is Intro Permissions Management. If you're not familiar with it, it's a relatively new product that we just launched a few months ago. It's all about managing permissions in Azure and AWS and all these different places. So anyway, yeah, big thing today is going to be trying to wrap up some of the Azure RBAC stuff that we started earlier in the week. Try to get that knocked out, try to get that nailed. I had a question from Discord about creating apps programmatically through Graph, which is pretty straightforward to do. Honestly, the hardest part about it will be getting a token that you can use to go call Graph. The Graph calls themselves are pretty uneventful. So, but yeah, so it's that's what we got going on today. So I guess we should get into it. Pretty quickly, we'll look at the graph. These really quick graph calls. We got a link to this out in Discord. Of course, if you haven't joined the Discord, you should join the Discord. People out there to help you and get your questions answered, and just come and hang out and be part of our little community of identity nerds, I guess. We did have a question just come up about, or actually didn't just come up, it came up a day or so ago, but about Graph APIs for creating Azure AD B2C and Azure AD tenants. Creating applications in B2C and Azure AD tenants programmatically through Graph. And so we've actually have some code to do this that's actually quite old and somewhat stable. It still kind of works the same way. It still kind of works the same way, and has persisted working that same way throughout multiple API revisions. So I'm pretty pleased about that. So I guess we'll take a look. We can take a look at what that code looks like, and we'll jump over into some other stuff. What do you say? I had a friend of ours here today. This pigeon that my kids like. They stuck him behind my desk. This guy. He's a pretty cool guy. The guy who writes the books has some pretty amazing characters, especially for little kids. So if you've got young children, the pigeon is a constant favorite. So go check it out. The guy's called, I can't remember his name at all. My kids know his name, but the author writes tons of kids' books. It's a lot of fun. So. Anyway, so we got this. This is just like this set of HTTP calls is from. This set of HTTP calls is using a thing called it's an HTTP client of VS Code, which is why it's in this .http file. And some of this goop in here is or specific plugins for making that thing work. But generally, the first thing you got to do is do a post to applications with a display name, and that's really about it. That's all you're going to use to get that. Now, the response from that should have a body, and in that body should be the client ID. So the application's ID should be back in there. And so, in that response is where we're going to see the new application ID that represents your app. At which point, then we need to go and add some permissions and identifier URLs. Now, this whole script here is all about creating both an API and exposing a scope, and then also creating a client that then requires that scope or uses that scope or requests the scope from the user, however you want to call it. But we have to expose the scope, and then our clients are going to go and consume the scope. So the second thing we're going to do is on that application ID that we just created, we're going to do a patch, and that patch will just be essentially you're patching in stuff into the manifest. I mean, if you want to go look at the manifest file that's in the docs, that's a good idea of the kind of stuff that you're going to post in, because they're very, very close together. So once we've done this, and all this is doing is creating OAuth 2 permission scopes, and we're creating one, which is access the API as a user, pretty bare bones. You may want to add more scopes, but of course this is the value of the scope that's going to come through in your tokens. So this is the thing that your API or your application is going to have to look for. So now that we have that, we'll go into a get so that we can get the scope's ID. Okay, so this gives us the actual ID of the scope. Now, this is probably one of the hardest parts about working with the Azure AD Graph API and actually manipulating graph objects. The hardest part here really is that most of the identifiers for new objects that you create are generated when you create them. So it's it's a little bit older API, and of course the platform, that sort of platform, that's a little bit of an old school way to do it, right? Where you submit and you get an ID back. Of course, there are derived IDs and all sorts of things that we try to do now so that we don't have to make as many round trips. But at least for now, that's the way life is when you're making graph calls. So there's a whole lot of, I'm going to submit with a big chunk of information, post this to the API or make a patch or whatever. I'm going to make this change, and then I'm going to get back the ID of the new object that I'm trying to create. And so the scope that we created here, that scope ID, we've got to make sure that we go and get that when it comes back. Now, applications and service principles. Anybody who's familiar with Azure AD, or not even familiar, but anyone who's had to use it before, I'm sure is familiar with service principles. So a service principle and an application are related. Think of the application as almost like a template. Service principle is the actual instantiation of an application registration. So the registration is sort of like all the data about the application, about what the service principle should be. And the service principle is the instantiation, a specific instance of that application registration. Now, in a single tenant, that doesn't really, it's not really a big deal. Like if it's in your Azure AD tenant, it's it's an app that you're building, then generally those two are going to be sort of one-to-one. That said, however, if you're building multi-tenanted apps, so an app that you are selling or that your partners are going to be using in their tenant or something like that, if you are building an application like that, the app ID will stay the same globally, but the service principal ID will change with every single tenant that installs your app or consents to your app. So service principals are a way, but service principals IDs are the things that we really need to use when we get down to some specific parts of this API. We got to use service principal ID. And so that's what we're doing here, is we're getting that service principal ID for various things. Like in this case, we're getting the graph service principal ID because we have to use that somewhere else. And so we're getting the service principal for the graph service principal, because we got to use that for making other calls later. Which we'll come back to. So next, we're making our clients. This is our API client. It's a SPA. It's got a redirect URLs. All that's sort of the same. Required resource access. Now, this is what's called static consent or static permissions. These are V1 things. If you've heard the Azure AD V1 or Azure AD Graph V1, etc. This is a V1 sort of consent flow. So what you're saying in doing this is you're saying this app needs these scopes all the time, and I know I'm going to get them. So please, like somebody's got to consent to these, called static consent. You got to consent to them up front. Now in B2C, there's no consent sort of framework, so it's a little different in B2C, because in B2C, you've got to do this if you want those scopes, because a user will never see like a consent prompt or anything like that, like a, yes, I allow this app to do this thing in B2C, because that's how B2C works. But in regular Azure AD, this is what drives that, oh, this app wants to access X, Y, and Z, permissions are yours, file read, this, that, whatever, right? Now the thing to keep in mind, and we've got a ton of talks and discussions and everything else about how to use dynamic consent, when to use it, why to use it, all that sort of fun stuff. But a lot of what's in there, we don't want to request permissions until we absolutely need them. And we definitely don't want to request permissions if only a very small number of folks need them, right? So if you've got an app and 10% of your people need to use, 10% of your users need to use file.read or something like that, you don't want to ask literally every user that comes through the door to grant you that permission, because now you're going to be overprivileged, and it's just nobody, that's not a privilege that you want to have, right? Separately, sorry, I'm getting meeting invites. I was like, oh, you didn't show up to this meeting, so because you didn't show up to this meeting, it must be because you're not invited to it. And I guess I don't think I'm going to go to that meeting today. Although maybe I should, because it looks like it's an important one. Although I don't know if it's, I don't know, let's see. But anyway, so you don't want to request permissions from users too early, and also if you only need them for a minimum number of users, right? So that's what's happening here, and this is because this is B2C. You could also not use this at all and not include required resource accesses. This has two. One is the API app ID. The other one is the graph. So this is like OpenID profile. So like user.read, signing a user in. That's essentially what these two are. And when you see something like this is one of the well-known ones, right? This GUID of an app ID. Resource app ID is essentially one of the, this is graph. So OpenID and profile, those are ones you need for signing in. So we need to give this app those required accesses, because it does need to sign you in. So it does need to get an ID token, for example, get your profile, whatever. Now we got to create our service principal for our API. So we create a service principal with our app ID. Now, what's interesting is this is sort of a two-step process. So the first thing we did was we created our application registration. The second thing we're going to do is create our service principal. Now, if you do this in the portal and through, I believe, Azure CLI, most of the CLIs and tooling will do both of these at the same time for you. But through Graph, they happen as two independent tasks. So you don't want to. This gives you the flexibility to create these two things separately in case you have some sort of intermediate steps that you need to do. There aren't that many of them, and I cannot, off the top of my head, think of a scenario where you want those two things to happen independently of each other. But if you do need them to happen, here's how we do it. So we've created the application registration by posting to app. We haven't created a service principal in our tenant yet, and that's what we're going to do here. And the service principal, of course, is important because that's ultimately this thing, the securable. That is the thing in the tenant that you attach permissions to, that you put users into roles for, all that sort of stuff. So then the last thing that we want to do is we want to do our consent. We want to actually do like an admin consent for these permissions up front. And that's what we're doing here. So these OAuth 2 permission grants, what we're doing here is adding a grant. So we are consenting to say, hey, all principals, so all users in the tenant are trying to access, when they're trying to access this resource ID, which is the API, right? So API or resource, like a thing that exposes scopes, and the thing that you need access to is generally called a resource. So that resource ID, what we're saying here is that when a user's coming from this application, and they're one of these users, all principals, and they're accessing this resource and this scope, it's allowed. It's consented. The consent's already done. You don't have to do it again. Same here. OpenID, offline access. And the reason that these two are different, of course, is because one of these is the graph resource ID, and the other one is the API resource ID. So we have to do two of those. Since we have those two different consents for two different APIs, we have two separate API calls that we have to make. So, okay, I've got to step away for 30 seconds. I will be right back. step away for a sec. My son is in school today, so it's a little bit chaotic. Anyway, so this conversation's been happening in the Discord anyway. So go over there if you wanna get the link to this code, which we can always put here in the chat here too. So if you need this code or you want to take a look at it, here's a place to go. Okay, so let's get back to now we've covered that. Let's get back to EPM. So big thing on EPM, like we've been working on for a while now, is our permission sort of Chrome extension, whatever you want to call it. Code for this we've got. So and I guess this is never a bad time to say, come join our hackathon at 425.show WAC EPM hackathon. Still going on through the end of the month. Not a ton of time left, but we've got just under 2 weeks before these are going to be submitted and judged. So if you want to get one in, now's a good time to start working on it. So what we've been working on here is one for EPM that lets us guide folks as they go through. So let's see here, and let's just take a look and see what we need to get, what we've got going on. So I did do a few little things since last time we were all together. Big one being just some really quick and dirty exponential back off on our target elements, because I realized that if we're on a different page, that our target elements probably aren't going to exist, right? Now, of course, this is still a static list, but we can sort of circle back around. But so this is a really simple poor man's exponential back off where we're just keeping the number of attempts and kind of making our recursive function here so that with each attempt we multiply it out by 5 seconds, which really isn't exponential as much as it's a linear. Exponential would be like the first one's 1 second, 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 16 seconds, 64, like all that, we could continue to get larger and larger. This is just a really bare bones 5 second one. 5 seconds, max 3 attempts. That way, because if the nodes that we're after haven't loaded in 15 to 20 seconds, because of course this is over, so it's probably going to be closer to 20, 25 seconds since load, not to mention we also have a 5 second delay on boot or on start. If those elements don't exist after 25 seconds, we could probably stop looking for them. There's just no reason to wait. And then since we're adding all these together, 5, 15, 30, they're going to get longer and longer. So we're, if we don't have these elements after a minute, we're probably not going to get them, and so we should just assume that it's time to roll. So last time we looked at the Azure RBAC API, and one of the things we found in there was this massive chunk of JSON regarding the different resource provider actions that we can do on them, right? So what's interesting about this is about a 6 meg minified JSON. It's 10 megs or so non-minified. And what's curious about Chrome extensions is that they have various storage APIs that at least appear to be essentially abstractions above other types of storage. However, you can sync things and do some pretty cool stuff. Like if you want to sync settings from browser to browser, for example, certain things you can mark as syncable, and some pretty cool stuff there. But we're talking about 6 megs of data. Now, there is a limit, which is 5 megs through the storage API, but I haven't actually seen yet where we can't necessarily ship it inside of the extension itself as a resource. So we got a new folder called data. It has 2 copies of the file, the unminified version, at least so that we can take a look at it here and there, but then also a minified one, just because it's we start talking about that much white space in a file, it gets it's a lot, right? So separately, in an attempt to also sort of reduce any extraneous load, we have a second file here called RBAC info. This being, if we look at the manifest, RBAC info is only going to load when we're in the analytics path of EPM. So if there's no analytics path, then we're not going to load it. Our normal content one is going to load all the time on every page, but our analytics one is not. because it's only this RBAC data, and it only really exists on this page, at least so far as I can tell. I'm probably sure it exists somewhere else. But for right now, we're only going to include this script into the analytics path, which also means that we'll only be requesting this file when we're in that analytics path. So we don't slow down the rest of the pages or the rest of the site for the sake of loading this permissions data. So the first and most basic thing I want to try is just loading it up. Like, let's just load 5-6 megs of JSON into memory, and then we'll start seeing how quickly it is for us to actually go through and find things and do queries against it. And if we go look at EPM, and we look at this is our analytics page. This is where we can see the kinds of permissions that somebody has, and we can start to, this person's got a permission creep index that's very high, which means it looks like this guy's got super, super, super high permissions, and we're not entirely sure why, right? So this is in AWS. Let's go to Azure instead, because that's where we really want to be. At least for what we have right now, we've got our Azure ones. Might have to reload this page and do that. Just so we're back to a clean slate. So let's switch our authorization system to Azure, because of course EPM has a nice sort of cross-platform thing. You can pull in your assignments from all over the place, AWS, GCP, Azure, whatever. So if we take a look in here, this is what we're after, right? We've got 12,000 unused permissions, and we've got 48. Now, these are all permissions that this user has, and so we can remediate them, handle them, etc. But the thing I'm starting to wonder is I'm fairly certain all of these things are not in the DOM right now. And when we start to toggle some of these, we see a few things start to change. Now, it's possible that they are here. And that's one of the things I want to look at first is, are these items, these individual list items, actually in the DOM? Because if they're not, what we could do is listen for our little expando click, and then in a very basic way, just go and find all these that match this selector. So I'm also learning that Chrome extension development is essentially just, it's just dev tools all day. It's just, let's just sit around and hack in the thing all day long, right? So if we go and look at this, these have a class of Explorer lists list item, right? So what I'm curious about is if we were to do even just in the console, if we were to do a really basic, let's see, how do I get rid of one of these in favor of the other one? Where's my console? Kind of weird, because I don't really want this middle thing right now. I don't need it right now. So how do we make it go away? Okay, so in our console, which apparently I can't seem to type in, I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but here's our console, all right. And we can see where our sort of poor man's exponential back off has worked. All right, so we got a few little comments in there just to say things aren't working. Okay, so let's take this selector and we'll do a document query selector all, and I'll put it on we'll do this list item thing, and let's just see how many we get. Okay, so let's see, what is that? It's going to be a length. So that says we have 0, so that's already bad. Because it's already, unless the length property is for whatever reason not populated on that. But if we look at our node list, it's also empty. So let's go back and look again and see. So here's our list item, and that looks like our lowest level, right? Is our Explorer lists list item, which is a div, right? So query selector all. Make sure we got the right one in there. That's our list item. Okay. Oh, is it? I wonder if I missed. I think I might be missing am I missing my period? Here we go. Looks like, of course, we need our dot. So if we do a length on that, of course, it looks like it's 16, and it's 16, which is excellent because, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So that means that the 16 that are available right now are the 2 that are expanded. Login, and then the 15 from Microsoft.iad, which is great. Because it means that instead of us attaching to 12,681 divs on boot and having to go and parse through the JSON and everything else, we can kind of lazy load it a little bit. So we'll preload the JSON file, And then, or maybe we just do it on the first one. So we'll preload the JSON, and then we'll start attaching these as these become available. So my thought is we do the hook for this will be we'll attach to these clicks, to the click events of these little triangle, these little expando buttons here, right? So this is our collapse table row button, which probably seems to be the best thing. So this is, it has the label, it's a button that has a label of collapse table row. So it's probably a good thing for us to attach to because it's also most likely, where the events are being fired that expand and retract. So if we take our button with this class, ultimately what we're going to need to do is we need to attach, or we would need to also have a listener for the click event that's one of our listeners. And presumably we can use our own click listener that is not going to subsume the other one or supersede the other one. I don't know that for certain because I'm not a JavaScript expert, but so let's see. Let's do query selector all, and this is a button of class that. And let's see how many of these that we get. Probably quite a bit. 266. So on each one of those, if we were to do a let's see, I guess we don't. Well, I guess what we'd really do is document add event listener. Let me go look at let me go look exactly at add event listener to make sure that we do that correctly. Add event listener. So we want to make sure that we don't take over the one that's already there. But of course, this is all a React app. Like the actual app is React. So it's possible that there could be, since that's like virtual DOM stuff, I'm a little curious to see when the page updates or when there's a repaint, do we lose all of our events and that sort of thing. But let's not worry about problems until we have them, I suppose. Okay. So add event listener is recommended. Allows more than one handler for an event, which is great. That's exactly what we need. So add event listener, the signature is the type, which will be our click, the listener, and then let's see what options we have. No, we don't need to capture. I don't think we need to worry about once, although once might be interesting because once we attach them, we don't need to attach them again. So once might actually be a good one for us. If true, the listener will be automatically removed when invoked, which may also have the potential to be a little bit better in terms of performance, or at least in the memory usage, but I don't know that for certain. So function specificity, passive will never call prevent default. We will never need to call prevent default. So I don't know why we would need to do that. Signal, okay, we don't need to worry about signal. And use capture, we don't need to capture. I don't think we need to capture. And then untry. Okay. So, goodness gracious, all these meetings. Whatever happened to my do not disturb? Oh, I had it turned on, but apparently not. So let's look at the signature for our thing here. So we add event listener of click to our, well, it needs to be on a certain object though, right? Where do we add an event listener? Do we add that to an element? Okay, yeah, to an element. Okay. So if we were to do query selector all, and we'll do button, the one that we just did. In fact, you should probably just be able to press up and get that, right? So we'll get our button. Let's do this. So button dot the buttons of this class, right? So we got all 266 of those. So here we'd want to add an event listener. And the event listener is going to be a click event. And then our function, I guess for the moment, what we'll do is let's just do console.log, because of course, because why not, right? When in Rome, do as the Romans do. And we'll just do a dollar. We'll do E node name maybe. Let's see if there's any data in node name. I'm not sure if there will be, but we'll see. So the console log, we'll exit that. And then what's the last one were options. We don't really have any options. So let's do that. Okay, add event listener isn't a listener. Look who can't spell listener today. Add event listener is not a function. Probably because it needs to be a for each, I'm assuming. Because I'm trying to do this on an entire array, not an individual, of course, because that would make way too much sense. Okay, so then we end up in, let's see, element, and then yeah, I think I already wrote some code for this on this other one. Since no one wants to watch me type in the same thing 47 times. Let's see. Found element. Yeah, arrow function. Okay. Yeah, that should be pretty clear. Okay. Element. Arrow function. And we'll just do, this is the event. So what we'll do here is an el dot add event listener. Oh no, did I just lose my console? Oh, there we go. Okay. Syntactically, are we okay here? Let's see. Do we have all of our stuff? I don't know why we have all this extra white space at the bottom. I heard a funny joke about white space, but okay, for each el, I guess we did lose it. It's kind of a bummer. Got this here. And then we'll do an el dot add event listener. I don't know why I'm doing this in the browser. I guess we could just go do it in the other thing, right? So here's our function that closes that, closes that, that closes that. So then we still need to close our for each, or we need to close our for each function, and then we'll close our for each. Is that good enough? Okay, so this is telling us undefined. So, okay, but the click event did attach. So, okay, el.nodename, okay, sure, node name is not there, but we did get this one, right, which is great. So we have our thing now, which is awesome. Love to see that. So now what we need to find is we actually are going to need the text that's next to this, or that's adjacent to that. Because that's the thing that we're going to go search for a JSON for. So if we go look at this, we're going to want to find, so here's our button. So it looks like our button is going to have a sibling of type. The sibling is going to be a list group name label. So that's going to be its sibling. And then that group name label is going to have other stuff in it, right? So our group name label is the thing where it looks like we're going to find our actual stuff then inside the text in there. So our function, now we should probably remove the other one, of course. But so we want to find the sibling, right? So so the event, I believe, has a target property, although we should be able, can we reference ourselves? I guess we can reference ourselves. So, what is the, actually there might be a query selector we can do for that. Because in the E, there's in the add event listener event, the event should have, the event has stuff on it, right? It'll have a type. Let's go look exactly and see what it is. Okay, so here's our event, the event type. Okay. And then yeah, so we got to remove it. That's the thing. Okay. Which we maybe while we're debugging it, using the once true might be a good thing. So what is the signature of that event? That's kind of what I'm curious about. Click, modify text. It's interesting. So this thing's listening for it, but instead of it passing itself into it, seems kind of silly. Like, why wouldn't you send in? Why wouldn't you send the event to the... I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sure there's a reason why, but I don't know why. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Because what would be the point? Because we get the target, right? So... So this adds a listener. Button to be clicked. This is adding all these listeners, right? So this one adds one to the other one. But button to be... So like, but all these IDs that they get are static. And I'm not seeing anybody actually passing this in. So the value of this, what's the value of this? The value of this inside the handler be referenced to the element. Okay, so we can use this, I suppose. It looks like current target is the event. Why can't I not just find the event object signature? Like, why is that so impossible to find? Whatever. Okay, so this object, and then we need to get the siblings. So that's the thing I'm curious about, is how do we get the siblings to an element? Is there just a siblings property? I don't think so. Get siblings. Look at that. Element in JavaScript. I suppose we could always go get jQuery or something fun like that, but let's take a look and see what we got here to get our siblings. First element child, okay. So our element, okay, so we create an empty array, return that empty array. So the element is the parent's first child. Oh, okay, next element, sibling. Oh, interesting way to do that. Okay. Now, is there a CSS selector for siblings? Because we could also try doing that, right? I hear music. I'm not entirely sure from where it is coming. Let's see. It's quite loud, too. I'm sure it's my youngest. The kid literally walks around the house playing music all day long. It's nearly impossible to get him to stop. I don't know what he's doing. At least he's listening to some good music, I guess. Where is that coming from? I actually don't see it. Oh, he's playing it in the kitchen. Oh, this child. I don't know. Anyway, sorry about that. Okay. Okay, so siblings. Can we use this? And I guess the other thing too is, can we use a sibling as in our query selector, right? And maybe parsing it through JSON, maybe parsing it through JavaScript is just going to be faster anyway. I'm a little surprised that the best we've got for getting siblings in JavaScript is to literally enumerate next element. I feel like that's a little brute forcey. So let's see. Get element siblings. Now, granted, maybe that's just maybe it is what it is, right? So this is 2015. That's old, but this looks like it uses jQuery. So I try not to use. It'd be nice to not have to use any additional libraries if we don't have to, just to keep the bloat down. And granted, we're also going to be loading a 6 meg JSON file. So maybe bloat, maybe we shouldn't be talking about bloat, not sure. Okay, so yeah, I guess it is, right? It's current node, next element sibling. So, So we've got our element, and then I guess there's a next element sibling, but we can't filter the next element sibling by a specific tag name either. It looks like. But I wonder. Okay, what if we did this? What if we got the parent, and then can we do a query selector inside of an element? That would be cool, because then we could query for just that one thing inside of there, right? Should be, I think, kind of cool. So, query selector all JavaScript element. So where are those? So it says, okay, yeah, this is exactly what we want to do. Parent node query selector all selector, right? So let's get the parent, it's a parent node, and then we'll do a query selector all, and in here we will look for, ooh, don't want that. In here, we will look for an element, a div of class. Actually, yeah, okay. We could probably look even, we'll go one layer down, and we'll actually go get the text. The text class, which is a child of that one. So here we'll get this class, right? Now there should, mind you, only be one of these in here. But let's take a look. So let's see, var text, and then we'll just do like a text dot, what is it? Inner text property. I mean, I have very little confidence in what I just wrote, to be perfectly honest. Okay, so it's still undefined, but that's okay. Getting a little bit closer. So what we could do, for the sake of ease, is I could maybe translate a little bit of this over back to into our code, so at least we've got it. We don't have to kind of keep doing it. So let's go over here to this RBAC info. So the first thing we got, so this is our script, this is our content script in our extension that we're going to run. So the first thing we want to do is we got to attach this event. So let's just copy this that we've been working on in the browser, and let's take a look. That's going to be some, we should probably shift, let's change this over to like our init data. And this is where we're going to go get, we're going to have to go actually fetch our data. And then let's do, we'll see, attach click events to nodes, to expander, or no, toggle nodes. Good call, Copilot. It is kind of like a Copilot. Okay, so in here, we're going to fix this a little bit. So the first thing we got to do is let's go find our toggles, which is here. Each one of these, we're going to add an event listener, and our event listener is this click. We're probably going to take this function, we're going to put this function somewhere else, so it's just a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to read. So we'll just call this function click, let's see, toggle node click. We'll call it clicked. How about that? Or click handler. That seems like a good one. Cool. And in here, we will, we'll just take this whole function and move that down there. No more anonymous function in here. Might make it just a little bit easier for us to at least visualize this code, do something with it, do something about it, right? And then our click here, we'll just add our toggle node click handler. Cool, okay. You know, I've got a new keyboard, one of these super clicky guys. Really like it. The ZSA Moonlander, really cool thing here. Only problem, Only problem is certain muscle memory has been really hard to replicate and really hard to change, especially home in keys, that sort of thing, because there's no keypad off the side. Okay, so we're going to find our toggles. We're going to attach. I guess that's pretty obvious. We're adding an event listener, so we don't need to do that. So when we do this, once we find one of these, for each one of these, we want to find the child inside of it, right? And for the moment, I'm going to console log this just so we can see what they look like. And let's also probably need to clean this up ever so slightly because it is kind of a mess. I'm going to take these out. And should we just make like a constants class maybe, or constants like function? I'm not sure. For the moment, I'm going to put them here. All right. I'm just going to use these so that we can sort of change them as we need to. So button explorer lists group name button. This is going to be our class. So we'll put this up here. This way, if we need to be adaptable a little bit, we can change these. Or we could also change the config, right? Because I have a feeling that these sorts of things change all the time. Hi, Kondraki, welcome. Quiet day today. So good of you to join. Glad you could join us. We're building a Chrome extension that goes and parses a bunch of JSON and attaches new data and extra data and tooltips and things to existing pieces of data. So welcome. Glad you could join us. So happy you're here. New to programming. Good luck. What anything in particular you're working on first, or is there some kind of programming that's more interesting to you than others? Let us know. Okay. So our toggle, we need to find all of our toggles, and so our toggle is going to go here. So here we'll use our toggle node name, and then our click handler, and then our text will be our, let's see, we'll call this our item text node name, and that is our labeled text, this big, long, ridiculous thing here. So we'll take this, put this one here. Java and Spring framework. Oh boy. Well, it sounds like fun. Lots of work in that too. So tons of stuff to keep you busy. Lots of the world runs on Java. So yeah, so that's cool. Good luck. Java and Spring. Spring, I mean, one of the biggest ones. So at least there's a huge community of folks out there doing Java and Spring. So that's good. I did Java for a little while at a job I took before I came back to Microsoft. I had a little bit of a hiatus on. Went to a different job and did some Java there. So Spring Framework is all about, so it's just like, there are a lot of other frameworks out there, but, and I'm not a Spring or Java expert. So there's probably a bazillion things that it does that I'm not even going to think about. But it does a lot of the boilerplate stuff. Things like, how do I set up like a login, like a local login? Or how do I do things like cookies for the basics of back and forth HTTP and, sessions, like where we can store data about a user who's at a website. Like, so much of that stuff is sort of, I don't want to say boilerplate, but a lot of it is, and it's not something you should have to implement every single time. And Spring Framework, I mean, Spring has a bazillion things that it does, so I'm totally underselling it right now. But it does a ton of stuff. So you can use it for, if you want to go build a web app, Spring's going to be your jam if you're building a web app in Java. Pretty sure you can use it for other stuff too. It's like, it doesn't have to be a web app. Web is primarily where it is, I believe. But then there are like all sorts of other like flavors or plugins, like Spring Security is where all the login stuff is and whatever. So VS Code or Visual Studio for desktop apps. Is that a question or a statement? I would say I personally use VS Code for most of the stuff that I do, but I don't do that many desktop apps. So I don't do I don't do a whole lot of desktop, so I don't use Visual Studio for much anymore. I use mostly VS Code, but I also don't get to write software every day like I used to. So I don't write as much software as I used to. But if I was doing desktop development, I think I'd probably look at Visual Studio. That's not to say VS Code can't do it or something else can't do it. There are lots of, there's like JetBrains has their really good IDEs. So like, what is it called? IntelliJ, I use that one for a little bit. They have a .NET IDE and Rider and whatever. So why, what? Which why? Why, what's the why? Why do I not write software for a living anymore? Or why would I not use VS Code for writing desktop apps? Not that I wouldn't. Just, I think I'd go with Visual Studio if I'm building Windows apps at least, because there's so much built-in stuff for building desktop apps. All the like Windows things for building like WinForms and for Maui and all of the things that let you, WPF, all that stuff lets you build like front-end UIs. At least for like .NET, Visual Studio is the way to go. If you're doing Java front ends or Java, Java things like that, Java desktop apps, then IntelliJ is what I would go use if I was going to use one, if I had to build a Java desktop app tomorrow, but desktop apps aren't really my world, so I don't do a whole lot of them. And so there's probably, I would guess, some others out there with stronger opinions on desktop at least. But for web, I use primarily .NET and do a bunch of JavaScript stuff, and I use VS Code for pretty much all that. So I don't really use Visual Studio for very much anymore. If you're building like Mac apps or like iOS apps, absolutely have to use Xcode. And if you're building Android apps or things like that, I'd probably stick with Android Studio or IntelliJ with all the Android bits plugged into it. So yeah, good luck. Good luck. I remember my first apps actually were desktop apps. I mean, it was 15, 20 years ago. And they were, I had a book called Beginning VB.NET or something like that. It was one of those big books, like the red covers. And the place I worked, somebody had quit, and they said, "Hey, do you want to go do development stuff?" And I was like, "Sure, I guess." I was like 19, I didn't know what I was doing. And I read that book cover to cover on vacation at the beach and built a bunch of WinForms apps in VB, Visual Basic. And when I got back, I learned that the app that they wanted me to work on was actually in C#. So that was fun. But I did have a really good friend who I made at work who helped me a lot, which was super helpful. So, but of course, back then things were pretty, software dev and all that was pretty, I guess maybe different from the way it is now. I don't know. Web is totally taken over. So I think things are at least a little bit different. Maybe not actually that different than they've been in the past, but they definitely feel a little bit different than they did when I was younger. But so did everything else. I wasn't old and creaky and uncomfortable all the time either, like I am now. So, okay. So, this click handler silliness. All right. So when we toggle our node, we need to go find the text of the thing inside of it, right? Which is our, like in this case, it's like Microsoft.iad. And the item text node name is this. So let's take our item text node name, and we're just going to put that in here. That way we don't have to worry as much about all these different things. And then we're just going to try to log it for the moment, because the next thing will be, now we got to go parse through all of our, now we got to go run look in here. So I think probably the best thing for us to do when it comes to this is let's parse it once when we start and have an object that's sitting there in memory that we can go and query, because hopefully querying it in memory will be faster than querying it, and certainly way faster than going and making network calls every single time. Unless it's possible, we may be able to take the graph call and do a limit, we could do a select on it. Or we could also query to a path. And if we can query to a path in that call that we're making to go fetch that permissions data, we've got a really good chance at making it, we then do have a good chance of making it chatty over the network, but pretty fast for adding these things in. Okay, so we're gonna start here. Let's just see if our transplant from one to the other actually worked. So come over here. Let's reload this page. Okay, so we've already broken, so that's fun. Attached permissions data doesn't exist, so that's right because it's our init. And the other thing we want to do is attach our click events to our toggle nodes. So we'll do that. So let's refresh. Oh, sorry, I got to reload we'll reload our EPM Genius extension here. We'll reload this page, switch it over to Azure, and away we go. That's right. You got to apply the filter. So one thing we should probably add in is when you make a change, we should just automatically move you over. We should automatically apply those things. Okay. Now, I don't see any errors from the stuff that we've done. So it's possible that it either didn't do anything, which perhaps it didn't, because now I don't see any of our events getting attached. So how quickly did this attach permission? Yeah. So I think we're probably at very similar to the other page. I think we're probably still in this sort of erase condition where the page hasn't actually loaded yet. So we're gonna have to. It should probably signal this sort of thing. In fact, what we could do in that signal is instead, I could just move these over. Right, so we'll just have this thing call its own init. I know that's not like clean JavaScript that we're doing it this way. So what we could do, call this like init RBAC data. Okay, put these two in here. And for the moment, we'll do this init RBAC, which will be our function here. We can scope these, make this a little cleaner, private some of these things so that we're not going to be leaking them everywhere. And then I'll just put this. We'll put this over here in our content as part of our last thing. Like this is not. I don't think this is a good way to do this, but I just want to see if it's good enough for the moment. So I'm gonna reload this. Reload. Let's do another reload here, and see where we get. Okay. Now we're in Azure. We gotta, of course, come over here and apply. Now this could also be something worth looking at too. Is are these changing when we do that reload? So I'm wondering, we may actually, because this isn't happening until later, we may actually have to attach these events later because I'm not entirely certain these even exist yet. When this page first loads, I don't think they exist because we're doing a couple things that are all changing the DOM. First, we're switching our filter here, right? And then we're choosing a user. So, I mean, none of those elements are going to exist for us to even attach to when it comes to our nodes. So really, now that also leads me to believe that if we were to do init RBAC, what was it, init RBAC data? Is that what we called it? No, it's not defined. What do we call it? Wonder if our, let's see. Or it's also possible that our thing isn't even getting loaded in here. Let me go check this manifest again. No, it should be good. Got our RBAC info, our contents there. So that should be okay. Because those will be loaded up, no problem. They should be there anyway. Let's go check to make sure. Yeah, attached permissions data is coming in, that comment's coming in. So that's coming from there, which is good. So let's put this, I'll put this here. My assumption is, that none of these DOM items exist yet whenever this is loading up, which means we're going to have to find, as when that part of the tree loads, we're going to have to essentially either call this again, call it for the first time. Okay, so init RBAC data has already been fired, but like when we do this now, does that mean that these attached? No, these aren't attached either. So, okay, so we got all that. Okay. We could, I guess. I don't want to say that because that would be bad. I don't even want to say it. Nope. So that's not saying it's not even there. But is our code there? I mean, it should be, right? So the code that we have. So I'm wondering, is this going to mean that we've got to? Oh, looks like maybe my cookies have expired too, which I'm sure isn't helping matters much. So does this mean then? Does this mean that we're going to have to look for when a user, well, but see when a user gets expanded, yeah, because we're going to have to attach to every single user who comes through, who we get through this. So we're going to have to attach to both the filter event and then also presumably to this. Now, I wonder if there's a way we could, I don't want to like watch the DOM. That might be a little bit of a circus. I don't know if we necessarily want to do that. Man, I don't like any of this. I don't like any of those solutions. They're all dirty. They feel dirty. Make me feel dirty, I'll say. So, but if we had to go down that route, we're going to have to know that you're using, and of course nothing changes in the URL. There's no pathing that's happening here to make that easier, sadly. So we're going to have to know that you've chosen this and that you've chosen a user. And once you've chosen a user, we'll then have to wait until these load, right? Ooh. Okay. Don't like that. But I feel like we're too far to come back or to back down. So what that means, what are we looking at here? This is, let's see, what kind of element is this? This is, why can I not see more of this? Why is it cut off? Oh, here we go. Table expandable row, expander button. It doesn't really mean anything though, right? Because where is this? This is in the identities table. Lame. I don't like this at all. So I guess one thing we could do, because what's this thing in? So this is our Explorer, right? So there's a loader here, of course. And this is the Explorer lists. Okay, so that makes sense. So that would mean, oh man, the whole thing's in the TR. It's fun, in a table row. So what we could do is, I guess, and I hate to even say this, we could look for this div that controls this container. And we could start to look for that. And once we find it, Which again, sadly, I mean, I wonder if there's a DOM event we could hook to where we can see everything that's being injected into the DOM. And then we can check it. I mean, don't get me wrong, that feels super, super hacky and gross. But let's see, item added. Is there an item added event for the DOM? Okay, here's one from 10 years ago. So who knows if it's still any good. Okay. Use a DOM mutation observer, which is supported in all modern browsers except IE 10 and lower. Okay, so that's pretty old. Okay. So flaws in the design of the original events. Okay. I don't know which parent. Let's see. Okay, so here's another one. So all those events, all these sort of subtree modified, node removed, node injected, all those things are all gone. Now, granted, these are all from years and years ago. Granted, this one looks recent. This was only a year ago. So a mutation observer. Now, a mutation observer is a new thing for me. I've never heard of this before. So there is a more elegant solution. There's an easier way to know if the node is attached to the DOM or not. So we have a new mutation observer called isDetached_element. If it's okay, I guess that's what this person's trying to do, right? So now this seems weird. Is removed the actual event? Like, what's the events that we attach to? I don't think that's what we'd want to do. We'd actually want to do this observer.observe at the document level. Now, for us, we may not actually need to do the observe at the document level. We could do it a little higher, or a little lower, sorry, because we don't actually need to worry about anything above. Granted, I don't know if that's there on load. Probably something for us to look at, but okay. So let's go look at the mutation observer. Now this is a 7-year-old question too. So, man, I'm learning a lot about JavaScript today. Okay, so create a mutation observer, and then we'll do. So then it gets observed. So then we get. We start observing. Okay. So what we could do is observe until we see that, then we disconnect, and that way we don't have to like constantly receive these, right? So the node that will be observed, cool. Options for the observer, which mutations to observe, cool. So the attributes, the child list, and the subtree. We don't actually need attributes, I think. I think all we're going to really need is child list. I'd like to know the difference between the child list and the subtree. We'll come back to that. And then we've got the callback, which has a mutation list and the observer. Cool, okay. So we go and look at here's where we're going to get into our actual stuff. We create the observer with that callback, and then we start observing. Okay, I mean, this might be a good way to start both of them, because the other one, kind of the same thing. We could just, instead of having a silly, cheap timer the way we do now, we could use this mutation observer for all that, which I kind of like that. I kind of like that pattern. I mean, it feels a little gross, but it doesn't feel as gross as this. So, we might as well give it a try. I don't know. Okay, so let me look at this. I'm just going to create a function here called wire up. Or we'll just call this connect observers, okay? And, okay. So let's take what Copilot offers us. I don't know if we actually want to do it on the whole page. But, now here's the other thing that makes me wonder. What if we use the mutation observer and we we observed until one of these was added, and then we ran our code, because that would be even cheaper, maybe. I don't know. I have to think about that. Okay. So these are mutations. So this is when things are happening. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Let's go back over to our other page for a moment. And we're going to take this out. So this way our main stuff isn't going to conflict with our RBAC stuff at all. And let's put this here. So if we look at this code, nothing is happening here. So that's good. We should probably turn this into a module or whatever that we can import over to the other one. So when we connect these observers, we're going to watch, and let's see, the observer for the main page doesn't actually need to be for the main page, though, I don't think. If we go back here and look, it really needs to be here in our Explorer. So once our Explorer table, or whatever this thing is called, once that has data, let's see, where was that? Or maybe we just don't worry about it. Maybe we just wait till we see the first one of these. I think maybe that's the best thing to do. So let's observe on. Should we observe the table? I guess we could observe the main body. Excuse me. I guess we could observe the main body, right? And when the main body has one of these things show up, we'll go and attach to it. Okay. Okay, so here's our mutation observer. And the one thing that we're looking for is when the toggle node name becomes available. So that has a whole list of mutations. So this is an array. So if mutations, oh wait, no, sorry. So in here, if our mutation, what do we have on here? If the added nodes, I mean, could I do a query selector all? No, because it's an array of nodes, right? In C#, I'd do an any, and away we go. I don't think we can do that in JavaScript, sadly. So for each of our added nodes, we want to find one I'm a little curious. So it wouldn't be an attribute because we're not monitoring for a changed attribute. What we're monitoring for is a new node that has a type. We're trying to find a node that has well, I mean, sadly, I hate to say this, but I always think it's this again. Added nodes. And then what we'll do is, oh, oops, don't think that's what we're looking for, but thanks, Copilot. So if the node has a class, node.class, is it class list? No. It wouldn't be, let's see. God, this feels very loopy and gross. So if our node what is this node? What is this type here? This is a node. I'll get back to this doc here. So if the mutation type, okay. So if the type is a child, well, that one's childless, but if the other one is, I guess the thing we've been looking for is like subtree, right? So we have to cast our node to an element in order to do that? In order to look at the element that, you know, one of the added nodes, right? One of the nodes that was added. I guess it wouldn't necessarily be an element. So that would mean, so if the node, node type, I don't think that's going to work. So what is this node again? What is this? A node. Okay. What is our node? Yeah, okay. But what's the... So how do we go from a node to an element, I guess, is kind of my curiosity. Let's see. How do we get an element out of our node? Let's see. Go back to good old W3 schools, see what they've got to say. So let's see. Let's see, okay. I really just want to find the CSS class of that node, but I don't know if the node, would the node have CSS properties on it? Because what's the name of the class? Is it CSS? It's just class name. I guess we could see if the class name is here. So if the node class name is equal to toggle node name, that's our toggle. I don't need quotes there, but if it's equal to toggle node name, then all we really need to do here is we got one and we can stop. And we can observer dot disconnect and then go and initialize our stuff. Because we'll know we've got some then, right? So, oh, I don't know. This is feeling super, super sketchy. Now the mutation observer function callback looks like it also takes the observer in, right? Yeah, okay, the observer, there we go. That way we can destroy it. I'll just call this OBS for now, just so that we don't have any sort of weird clash. Okay. So this thing will be able to Okay. I'm gonna reload this and we're gonna see we're gonna see if this happens. I guess we need to add a connect observers in here. So let's reload this and see what we get. I have nearly zero confidence that this is going to work, but okay. So some things were added. Okay. Were these added? No. Okay. So it's almost as if they don't. So even though these nodes have been added, it's almost as if they didn't actually get added in terms, at least to that observer, right? Like the observer didn't even see them. So what is the configuration for our observer? That's one thing I guess I did not take a look at. So the mutation observer has some configuration. Let's see. Target, right? Okay, so DOM node. Options, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Okay, subtree. To extend monitoring to the entire subtree of nodes rooted at target. All the other properties unextended. So the default to that is false. Child list, we monitor the target node for new child list. That must be, oh, that's happening only at the root, it looks like. So that's probably part of why. Okay. Now this might be interesting. An array of specific attribute names to be monitored. I'll have to come back and take a look at that. And character data, modified specified target node for changes to character data. I don't think we have to worry about that. Let's only for the moment, I'm gonna look at subtree. So let's turn on our turn off character data and let's do subtree instead. I think subtree is probably the one that that's probably the reason why we never fired, but we're also probably going to end up calling this method a bazillion times, but which performance-wise would be a total nightmare. But let's at least see if this validates my thought anyway. Okay, so it's running a bunch. It's running a bunch. Running a bunch. Running a bunch. Open this guy up. Still running. And so if we look at some of these, if we look at added nodes, so some of these have no nodes that are being added. So these are attributes. We don't want attributes, right? So let's take attributes off, because I don't care if the attributes change. All we want is child list and subtree. Okay. Should hopefully be slightly less. And it may just be, at this point, it could just be something, maybe it's just a matter of finding the right ones. Okay, so these are childless changes, cool. Got those. If we go and open this up, we're gonna see our childless targets, okay. I mean, this is looking like we're getting node lists. Here's our node list. We've got div explorer list group, which I'm 99% certain is exactly what we need. So perhaps something's missing here. It's the class list. Oh, I bet that's what it is. Class list is of course, because it's a list. Class list is a class list, and then of course for arrays. Well, yeah, because class name. Oh no, class name's there. So class name. So what we could do here is instead of logging each one of these, let's just log our. Let's just log our node class name, which is probably going to be stupidly chatty. Now, it could also be that if the class name is, of course, class name could be multiple because we're going to see that. So let's see what we get here. Toaster. Cool, cool. Explorer lists list group. And then where's our little toggle guy, right? Our toggle is called our toggle is a button with this class. And so what I've done, I believe, is our toggle node new. We got a button listed here. And so what it really should be is our toggle node class. And that way, and we can go clean that up later, but let's see, toggle node class. Now the other thing, of course, we'd always do the button one, but let's see. So toggle node class, that should all be there. We'll give this a reload. If this works, I'm gonna get out of here because I gotta go to other meetings and do my day job, sadly, today. So I'm gonna go be a productive member of society, or at least of work. if we get to a good place with this here. Okay. So it looks like I didn't really get anything here. I hate doing this, but we're going to do it anyway. Is it too lower? I think it's too lowercase, actually. All right. I guess for the moment, we'll just do I hate doing this, but node class name. Cool. Let's give this a reload. See what we get here. Oh, sorry, we gotta reload my JavaScript here. Reload our extension code here. Got an SVG animated string here, okay? What's interesting is that we don't seem to be getting those check marks. Where are they? I mean, surely they're being added in, and we've got subtree and child on, which means the child's going to be getting parsed too. But I'm surprised that for whatever reason we don't seem to ever get we don't ever get that. It's really weird. So I guess maybe what we look for is the entire row, the group. So I'm going to change this to, let's change this to the group, just for the sake of, I'll call this row node class, and we'll change this one to row node class, because inevitably I would forget to do this, and that would be bad. So, all right, let's, reload, blah, 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 blah. Okay, reload, yeah, okay. So we're going to open this up. Okay. Explore lists, explore group items. And so the group items are things that get added. The list group is something that gets added here. This is a list. I believe this is a whole list group, right? List group name. And then this whole list here is a list group box. Okay. So list group name. Yeah, I mean, that's it right there, right? Okay. And so when this has that one, if the class name equals this, I mean, that's it, right? Explore list group. I mean, I guess we do a two lowercase, I guess, just to make sure we don't have any. But ultimately, I'd be really surprised if that was true, that was the actual problem. So let's go take a look and see. Okay, got our Azure one up. Let's get to our console. Okay, cannot read properties of undefined. That's okay, interesting there. Got one. Okay, so now that we've gotten one, okay. It looks like it stopped, which is great. And now we're getting our node list in our function, which is even better. So I think that worked, although I don't know why it happened 30 times here, but maybe it just was the timing it took to actually go and get rid of it. That's what I'm feeling. I guess we also need to check for, like, if class name is null and all that sort of stuff. I'll come back around to that. So to do, be defensive. Of course, you always want to be defensive in your coding. So now that we have those there, that also turns off the observer, which is great for performance. Then we can attach our click events to our toggle nodes. Our toggle nodes are happening. And so then this code is ultimately running. Our text.innerText is running, and we end up with this here, which we should be able to, let me just put this in here, expanded, and then let's do this to see if we can actually find the node that the user clicked. Save, reload this one, and open this, got them. Expanded object node list. Okay, that's better than nothing. Our object and node list, of course, I didn't pick the first one. Query selector all, and I'm just gonna literally just take the first one just for the sake of simplicity. I'm actually kind of curious how many there are. Let's do text nodes, and let's see, we'll do, let's see, found, because if there are more than one, then I think that we've probably got a scoping issue here. This should be text nodes 0, which again, we'll have to be more defensive about this, but we're gonna get the inner text. All right. But at least then, this way, now we can go actually query our JSON for that parent, and then go find all of our children that go along with it, which is ultimately the goal. I'm glad we learned about mutation observers today. I think that's actually kind of neat. I wasn't expecting to learn about them today, and I'm kind of happy that we did, because I feel like it makes a whole lot more sense. Okay. Found one, expanded dynatrace.observability, awesome, which means now we actually have our stuff here, and we can go write another super tiny function that's just, find parent, or find resource provider in permissions data, resource provider, and we're gonna have this, which we'll just put in here. Guess we can't really await that, can we? So we'll have to do a fetch, and then we'll do a then, and then we'll do a JSON. Okay. And then in here, permissions data. So that's our then. That's still returning a promise. So we'll have to then the then, right? Which gives us our actual JSON data. Do we not? I don't think this is a promise at this point now, right? It's still a promise. Okay. But that doesn't work. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't even make sense to be there like that. It's a voided promise. What? Sure. I do not know how to do this. I don't want the promise, right? So we're going to do a then. We want it to go, so unfulfilled, yeah, we want it to go to JSON, right? But of course the JSON then has to be, I guess I honestly probably can't do that here either like that, can we? All right. I'm gonna keep this really simple. I'm gonna just put this back where it was. Instead of trying to be fancy with it, we're just gonna put it back where it was. We're gonna have sadly a global variable called permissions data. And what we're gonna do is set perms data to that. Okay. So in here, our resource provider perms data should have, and this is going to go back to we're going to have to look back at our RBAC data to see. In here, we're going to have a value, and then we'll have operations. So we're going to have to do probably a JS path or a JPath, whatever it's called, JS path, JX path. So we know the value is going to be a big array. That's fine, but then I guess we're going to have to go through the operations to find the node. Interesting. Or sorry, the resource types. Wish there was a way we could trim this up. Because yeah, ultimately the resource types are ultimately what are going to drive this. So where is the parent? So this has a set of operations and a set of resource types. The ID looks like the name is what we're going to be looking for. And so in that JSON, we're going to need to query for all the nodes that match that name. Now, of course, there should only be one, but we're going to need to get that whole object. So the other thing we should do probably is set our perms data to the value property of that, right? So we don't have to, because the value is going to be that big array. So then we get into, okay, cool. How are we going to go query? How are we going to go query an array? An array in there. Okay, I got to go. So I got other calls I got to do. I got to do other meetings today. Like an adult, I have to go adult and do meetings. But Tuesday, our good friend Shannon is going to be back. She's going to have some other folks here talking about EPM. Next Thursday, I'll be back to wrap this up because we got to submit it the following Tuesday. Can you believe that? So we're gonna get this sort of squared away. Again, as always, be sure to join our Discord as we sort of as we progress down the line. Be sure to join our Discord, and you can ask your questions there. Be sure to join the EPM Hackathon, although you don't have a whole lot of time left just yet, but it's 425.show/EPM-hackathon. I'm going to get out of here and go be an adult for the rest of the day, but thanks for coming and hanging out, and we'll see you on the other side. See you on Thursday. See you next week. Have a great weekend. See you, everybody.